Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Material Matters with Grant Gibson. The show has been running for over 6 years now. However, for listeners who might be new to all this, the idea is I speak to a designer, maker, artist or architect about a material or technique with which they're intrinsically linked and discover how it changed their lives and careers. This episode is a little different because we're going to be talking about an object as much as we do a material. So today I'm delighted to introduce my guest, Tom Broughton. Tom is the founder of Cubitts, a modern spectacles company based in London's King's Cross. The company started in 2013 from his kitchen table and has grown to 20 stores across the UK and US, serving 250,000 customers across 100 countries. It offers frames in a number of materials, such as stainless steel and titanium, but has been renowned for its use of acetate. According to the company's website, Cubitts was founded to help people live better lives through spectacles they wear proudly, and creating a better and more responsible industry along the way. Tom, thank you very much for doing this. How are you?
I'm actually very well, Grant.
Oh, good.
Very excited about our chat today.
I'm very glad to hear it. Thanks very much for doing this. So, how do you help people live better lives and create a better industry?
It's a good question and something we think about often. I mean, for me, obviously, we're a spectacles designer, manufacturer, retailer, repairer, advocate, proselytizer. Is that a word?
No, that is a word. It's a good word.
Proselytizer, yeah. I guess our whole thing really is about how you can make people proud to wear these strange inanimate objects that sit in the middle of their face and allow them to see. These kind of objects that have a sort of slightly strange checkered history, which I'm sure we'll get into.
We may well do. I mean, we have a tradition of asking guests on this show where they are. It dates back to when I used to interview makers in their studios. I mean, we're talking over the internet. There's a kind of rack of glasses behind you I can see on the kind of right of my screen. So where are you right now?
I'm in our head office, which is in King's Cross on Brewery Road, in one of our small little rooms. I was actually going to be in a bigger room, but all the meeting rooms were full. So I've been shunted into this little corner spot. But it's actually, as you say, to my left is an entire wall, floor to ceiling of glasses. And then straight ahead of me, which is perfect really for this conversation, is a wall full of acetate, which you can't see. But this was by accident, not design.
I'm quite intrigued, having done the research on you. Are you still living in the Isokon building in Hampstead?
Yes.
I'm kind of interested in how your personal and work lives bleed into each other, because for those who don't know, the Isokon building was designed by Wells Coates for Jack and Molly Pritchard. I think it opened in 1934 and became this kind of British icon of modernism. Walter Grotius and Marcel Breuer of the Bauhaus stayed there, for instance, and now so do you. It's an extraordinary building. Is it fair to say that period of design has been an important influence on Cubitts?
I mean, hugely, both directly and indirectly. I think that kind of period of early kind of post-Bauhaus modernism, before, I think, so many people associate kind of modernism with kind of mid-century, but that kind of particular movement, and I think in Britain as well, in the kind of early 30s, when suddenly it was, this kind of design philosophy was tied to a much bigger political philosophy and this rethinking of how people should be living their lives, really, and how art and architecture and design played such an important role in that. I mean, I think I stumbled across the Isokon when I first moved to London in the early 2000s, when it was still derelict, and sort of fell in love with the whole backstory.
I mean, you started a Facebook appreciation page, I think, in 2008. I mean, you really did fall in love with it.
Yeah, I did. And it was almost my dream to live there. So I still feel very, very privileged that I can live there today. But it's the sort of design philosophy that underpins it. Obviously, historically predated Cubitts, but if it hadn't been for that, I don't think. Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult because you only have one life, don't you? But I don't think I could ever unpick the influence of that the Isokon and that kind of early modernist design philosophy had on me, which in turn then had on Cubitts when I set that up.
Yeah. I mean, can we talk a little bit about your company, Cubitts, and how it's changed since it started in 2013 at your kitchen table in King's Cross? You have 20 shops now. How many people do you employ?
It's about 152 last time I checked.
And are they mainly retail? Are they in the shops, or do you have a manufacturing facility? How do you structure the company?
So of that 152, there's about 100 that are in shops, probably. So on average, kind of 5 per shop. But they're a mixture of kind of, I guess, retail staff, but dispensing opticians and also ophthalmic opticians. So yeah, we employ, maybe 12 to 15 kind of optometrists as part of that mix. And then of the remaining 50, the majority are in production, which is both kind of glazing lab and workshop. That's about 30.
Where is production? Is that in King's Cross as well? Or?
Yeah, just below me. Then of the remaining 20, it's like all your classic support team, like customer service and finance. And I think when people join us, we actually hired someone recently to do our kind of press, PR, that kind of thing. And he joined, and I think he was kind of, he said he was shocked at how few people we actually have in those kind of traditional support roles. So 150 people sounds like a huge amount, but kind of in our kind of support team, supporting those stores, supporting the e-com, there's actually very few.
Yeah, interesting. And presumably during that time, your role, since you launched in 2013, your role must have changed enormously. I mean, I'm wondering, could you talk us through a typical day back in 2013 and a typical day when you're not talking to somebody like me today?
Oh, God, take me back. I mean, I guess the first few years, you are obviously literally doing everything, right? Now I'm much more metaphorically doing everything. Then it was literally doing everything. I mean, a lot of the time, it's funny. I was in our store in King's Cross the other day in Cold Drops, and the team mentioned that one of our first ever customers had come in, and he was still wearing the frames that he bought back in 2013, and he told this story which I don't remember this specific incident, but that he ordered a frame online, and then a few hours later, I popped up outside his door with his address scribbled on a Post-it note, and I came around to measure a measurement called a pupillary distance, the distance in your pupils in millimeters, which you need to glaze the frame. And it kind of took me back, both sort of nostalgically and also through a fever dream of those kind of first couple of years where I was literally cycling around London to measure people's pupillary distance, or to pick up copies of their prescription, or to adjust a frame. And so, yeah, in those days, you were literally, you were kind of beholden to the ebb and flow of kind of customer orders. I mean, mainly ebb, so there weren't very many. But
it must have flown eventually.
Yeah, I guess it did. I mean, after a couple of years, the flow began, but yeah, there was a lot of ebb.
I'm presuming now you have 152 staff you're managing. Do you enjoy management? Lots of entrepreneurs don't so much.
No, not really, if I'm perfectly well, I enjoy working with people.
Yeah.
To work with brilliant people is the greatest joy, right? And to work in a shared way on a kind of common goal and go through all of the struggle and the adversity and then have some kind of shared positive outcome and sense of achievement is one of the best things about being alive. Directly managing people, I find a lot less fun. The structured management. And I think as the company kind of grows and goes through those different phases, and now kind of, when people join a company of 150, they have an certain expectation that there should be structure in place and processes and performance reviews and career paths. Exactly. And training materials and all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, there's elements of that I enjoy, but it's definitely not my strength. There's other people that we have in the company who are much, 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 much better than that.
Yeah. Did you have a plan when you started back in the day? Did you expect to be where you are now a little over a decade ago?
No. I mean, genuinely, there was no plan. The plan for the first couple of years was, honestly, I started Cubitts as a hobby because I really loved glasses. I love spectacles. I collected them. It was just something that I did for kicks. And I thought maybe I could turn this hobby into something, a kind of, it was before people had started using that ghastly term side hustle, but it was before it was kind of how could I put a bit of structure around this thing? And the idea was never, and for the first year of Cubitts, I had another job.
Right.
This was just something that I just ran alongside my main job. And it wasn't until we took on some investment and the investor was like, I'm only going to give you money if you stop doing all this other stuff and focus on this spectacles thing, that I stopped that. And so then the first few years were just about how you kind of survive, how you keep going. And I think it's only really, to be honest, we've kind of backfilled the plan as we've grown. And I still wouldn't say there really is a plan. I couldn't, in 5-10 years time, I mean, invariably it feels to me that you create a plan for other people, not for yourself. And often that's for investors or banks, or because you're going on a podcast. It's the thing about the plan is like the element that always kind of gets sort of, it's assumed but always hidden, is the kind of the time frame. Like, I would like Cubitts to be bigger and better and stronger and have, all of that kind of stuff. But like, over what time period? And a lot of the time you're not really in control of the time period, because global pandemics happen and cost of living happens and political change happens. And so you can't really you can only really control the direction in which you're going. And I kind of still adhere to that. So I still think hopefully we're going to get better and grow and, all that kind of stuff. But how quickly and in what way, who knows?
I'm presuming you don't cycle to your customers and measure their eyeballs any longer. Are you still on a day-to-day basis involved in the design of the frames?
Yeah, intricately.
Right.
Very much so. And to be honest, over the last sort of, we've been going 12 years now, right? Nearly 13. So there's been a kind of ebb and flow of that over those 12 years where I have been more involved and less involved, but it's the elements I enjoy the most. And I've thought in the past, I shouldn't be as involved in that kind of level of detail now. And then other people have come in to kind of take that off me, but it's never, I think I miss it too much.
Yeah.
So I think I've learned that there's elements of it, whether kind of from a sort of business best practice point of view, should I be involved in that level of detail? Don't know, but I think it's important for me, to be honest.
Fair enough. I mean, I think before we get into kind of the meat of this interview, it's important to sort out a little bit of terminology from the research I was doing. You don't like the word eyewear. You make spectacles.
Yeah.
Is the difference important?
It's very important. I really dislike the term eyewear. I feel it's because, first of all, just on a structural perspective, what it's trying to do is bring together two things that I think are polar opposites, which are spectacles and sunglasses.
Right.
And I take umbrage with them being thrown together.
Why?
Because spectacles are a necessity to allow you to live your life and allow you to see. They are, for me, they are the first thing that I do in the morning. Before I grab my phone, I grab my glasses. But the last thing I take off at night. They are an indelible part of my life. And they also have a background as, there's a sort of, stigma is the wrong word, but they have a whole history being intrinsically related to a medical deficiency, vision, sight. And to me, because of that, they're important. Sunglasses, and they're a very big part of our business, right? So I don't want.
Yes, I was going to ask that. You do sell them by the truckload.
And they're very important. And, when I like them and they're great, but they're more ephemeral. They're linked to the seasons. They're linked to a feeling. You take them on, you take them off, you lose them. You put them on the side when you're lounging on a beach. Do you know what I mean? They occupy a different part of someone's psyche and someone's being. And I think the arbitrary decision to kind of bundle them together under this very, very, to me, very sort of vacuous and empty term of eyewear does both of them a disservice.
Good. I'm glad we sorted that out. And Tom, I'm kind of with you, I think. I mean, as I mentioned in the introduction, this episode is likely to be about the object as much as the material, but we are called Material Matters. So we should talk about the material with which most of your spectacles, not all, but most of your spectacles are made, which is acetate. I mean, can you tell the listeners quickly, what is acetate?
Well, the word acetate is short for cellulose acetate. So it's a type of, it's essentially a modified plant fiber. So it is a material that, a plastic, for want of a better word, it's not a petrochemical, but it's a plastic which is derived from raw cellulose.
So from wood pulp?
Comes from wood pulp, yeah, exactly. Or like wooden cotton.
Cotton fibers as well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you take the material, and then it goes through a series of chemical reactions. So you add, forgive me, I don't know the exact acids, but you go through a bunch of processes where you add various kind of acetic acids. And then it creates these acetate esters of cellulose. And then that output material becomes this thermoplastic that goes into becomes a sheet material that goes into glasses production. And it has this, I think it's been around for 150, 170 years. And it was developed not for glasses. It was developed for a whole bunch of other materials, mainly for kind of the early cameras, for films. It was textiles, fibers for textiles. And it really is from the kind of, but its root is in the kind of photographic and cinema industries. And it wasn't really until the early 20th century that people realized that the actual material cellulose acetate could be used for the production of glasses and frames. And I'm sure we'll dig into it a lot more, but I find it really interesting because the material itself and the development and the design of glasses are intrinsically interlinked. The design of glasses that we see and know now is in part because of the innate characteristics of acetate and cellulose acetate.
I was going to ask what the characteristics of acetate are. Why use that rather than a traditional petrochemical plastic, if you like?
Well, some people do use petrochemical acetates, and that's normally for injection molded frames. So maybe I could go even like further back, kind of pre-acetate.
Yeah, go back, Tom, go back.
Because some form of visual correction has been around for, depending on how you define a pair of glasses, some people would say thousands of years, because you had things like Inuit snow goggles that were made for things like ivory and wood. But really it was the first pair of glasses that people would recognize as glasses, i.e. with arms and temples, comes from the early 18th century. So there's a bloke in Soho called Edward Scarlett who had this realization that people were living longer. I think in that period, they were living, into their 40s.
Wow.
So people needed glasses for the first time, really, to be able to wear all day or for long periods of time. So he realized that at the time people were wearing these pince-nez and these occasional use frames. And he realized that most people have these flappy bits of cartilage on the side of their head, known as ears. And he thought, well, let's harness those ears to have a pair of glasses which can sit on their face all day. They can cantilever between the nose and the ears. And so he was then just looking for different materials he could use just to hold those lenses in position and fit on the nose and fit on the ears. So he looked at material. There were a lot of metals were used. So steel, brass, silver, even gold-filled alloys. And then any other material that could be shaped and formed. So most of it was natural materials. So things like turtle shell, famously so, and horn and bone and wood and materials like that somebody could take, they could cut, they could whittle, they could shape, they could form, they could bend in some instances so that they could fit on the face and hold the lens in place. Those materials were expensive and rare. So it was when the early plastics came along, people thought they were a real breakthrough. And actually the material that predated acetate was a material called celluloid. So that was the first plastic that was used for making glasses.
And obviously for film.
Yeah, exactly.
Also for billiard balls, I think I'm right in saying. And they'd often explode. When the balls hit each other, they would...
Well, exactly. And that's why in glasses, they didn't take off in the way that people wanted because they were flammable. And it's not a particularly great characteristic for a product that's in the middle of your head. And when celluloid came along, it had a lot of the characteristics that cellulose acetate had, which was that, and to go back to the question you first asked, which was it is hypoallergenic, so it can sit on a face. It can be milled. It is generally pretty lightweight. It can hold a lens, which is obviously the frame's main purpose, and it can hold a lens. There's a whole bunch of characteristics in that. So first of all, you need to get the lens into the material. So one of the benefits of celluloid and cellulose acetate is that it responds to heat. The downside of celluloid, if it's too much heat, it explodes. But you can work it and you can use temperature to regulate the properties of the material. So with acetate, when you heat it to a certain point, about 60 degrees, it gets soft. And then, so you can pop a lens into it and then you can cool it and then it contracts. And so it holds the lens in place.
So it's what's called a thermoplastic in that case.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It can also be shaped nicely. So one of the things about cellulose acetate is you can inject what's called a wire core, which is a small piece of metal that runs down the side, which means that you can, when you heat it, you can bend it and the metal holds shape. So when it's when it cools, it doesn't revert to its previous original shape, which is very important for acetate. It can also, there's lots of other characteristics. It reacts to acetone. It can be laminated. It can be repaired. It can be bonded to other materials. So cellulose acetate, when that sort of dropped into the mainstream in the kind of, well, the 1930s really, it suddenly meant that designers and makers had this material that was relatively inexpensive. It could be milled relatively inexpensively. It could be worked very well. And crucially, it could also have color and pigment added to it.
Right. So into the mix, you're not painting
into
it
the mix.
On top of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at raw cellulose, when you see it in this kind of like sausage-like original form, this gloopy material, it's completely clear. Obviously has no natural color, but they realized that they could just add a pigment to it. And if you see the videos of cellulose acetate being made now, you can almost see people work it like they do, or well, not people anymore, machines work it like you would a pasta. So, but you can add these dyes to it, these pigments to it, which can then either add a full color to it, but then you can chop it up and then create what we'd now know with these mottles or Havanas or turtle shell shapes. And yeah, there's lots of different techniques for adding depth and color to the material. And what that allowed people to do is it suddenly allowed designers to take glasses from the kind of 200 years that predated it, where they were very much seen as a medical device. And you think a lot of those materials that we use, these kind of metals and shells and horn, in those days, the whole idea was to minimize the amount of material used to hold the lens, because frankly, you didn't want to be seen in this material because it was seen very much as a medical device, to then suddenly linked to the kind of the 30s and kind of changing fashions and changing habits into these beautiful, rich materials, when plastics were seen very much as this kind of vanguard of the future, these pioneering new materials that were going to bring human beings out of this kind of post-World War I economic challenged period into this vision of the future. And they were intrinsically linked to that. So suddenly people, then it kind of gave the designers confidence and kind of customer appetite to suddenly start designing frames that weren't kind of unashamed, weren't embarrassed to, and as a consequence, so unashamedly small, that could really play into the intricacies and the beauty of the underlying material, much bigger designs, much bigger shapes, much more use of color, much more use of detail. And that kind of really defined spectacle design from the kind of, from the 30s really up until the sort of 80s and 90s.
And do you think it defines Cubitts?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what I like about glasses is when you can see people wearing glasses. And I think one of the reasons that I wanted to delve deep into this weird historical world of optics was that when I was buying glasses for the first time, the people I thought were, when I was 14, 15 years old, growing up in Leicester, a confused bloke from the East Midlands. Obviously, I listened to the Smiths, and I thought, Morrissey was the coolest person ever. And he wore these pair of, NHS spectacles that I thought were the most amazing things. And then when I first started getting into music in the kind of mid-late 90s and fell in love with the band Pulp, and Jarvis Cocker wore these kind of big, unashamedly big glasses. And to me, I associated confident spectacle wearing with spectacles that were themselves confident, that didn't try and shy away from their design or structure or statement or size. And so it was always natural to me that if you're going to wear glasses, you wear glasses. You wear them confidently. They're part of who you are. And what I couldn't reconcile that with in the 90s in Leicester was going into an optician where it seemed that all the glasses were designed for people that didn't want to wear glasses. They were rimless and tiny and small and shallow and embarrassed. And that kind of disconnect, I think in hindsight, probably started planting the seeds for what later became Cubitts.
Yeah. I mean, for me, interestingly, it was Elvis Costello. I'm obviously a few years older. Just going back to the technical side of it for the moment, where do you get your acetate from generally? Italy?
Yeah. So the majority is from a company called Mazzucchelli, who are kind of the grand old dames of acetate making. So they've been going since the I don't know the exact date, but it's the mid 1800s, and they predate acetate. I think their history is originally in making like things from bone, and they made things like buttons and small little objects like that. And then I think the story is the founder of the Mazzucchelli company traveled to America, saw what was happening in the kind of film industries and with cellulose as the material, and thought, aha, I can try and turn this into something, and kind of imported that idea back to Italy and then started making acetate. And they're based by Lake Como, and they have been going for 170 or odd years, and they kind of produce probably they're the most famous of the kind of premium acetate suppliers. We also use another acetate supplier who we've been working with more recently, who are based in Japan.
Well, this is why your PR got in touch with me, and it's the extra spur I needed to interview you, which you've been on my list for some time. But why this particular Japanese manufacturer of acetate?
Well, the Japanese, as the Japanese often do, take a slightly different approach to a lot of other places. And so we work with a company called Takiron, who are the kind of oldest acetate supplier in Japan. They were founded in Osaka in the early 20th century, so a little bit later than Mazzucchelli. But their approach, they just have a different approach to the actual production of the raw material. So, as I mentioned, you in the production of the acetate, you take the raw cellulose acetate and you add various acids and plasticizers, and then pigments, and then colors and dyes. The difference between Takiron's approach has been they use more plasticizers, more solvent, and they allow the acetate to cure for a much longer period of time. The net result is the acetate is much, much denser. So the material itself is essentially, very crude terms, this is the non-scientific term, is essentially allowed to dry and harden for a longer period of time. And so that means that essentially it's all high density, which when you're designing the frame, it has a bunch of different characteristics. But one, it means that frames can be much thinner. So the frame that I'm wearing at the moment is made from Takiron acetate, and the thickness is about 3.2 millimeters at the front.
And that's because it's harder because it's been left to dry longer.
Exactly. Which means that, it gives you more design freedom. Whereas with a frame from Mazzucchelli, I wouldn't normally go less than 3.6 millimeters. And that 0.4 millimeters doesn't sound like much, but when you're designing frames, it actually makes a huge amount of difference. The second kind of characteristic is that because it's denser, it's also harder. So it means that you can do things like, it's much less likely to scratch, for example. So you can have much sharper, harder corners, because when you put the material in the tumbling barrels, which is one of the stages where you deburr the material, it takes less of the material off because of its hardness. It also means you can polish it much more. So obviously, the more you polish a material, the more you're through the deburring, the polishing, and the glossing, you're taking a very, 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 very tiny amount of the material off. With Takiron material, you can work it for a much longer period of time, which means it can develop just a different sheen, a different lustre, which I think I really like. And so we kind of use both for different purposes. I think the original, and they both have their own benefits. The Mazzucchelli material, you can have much brighter, more vibrant materials. And that's what it's kind of known for, really, kind of really beautiful mottles and Havanas. Whereas I think the Takiron material is much darker, a bit gloomier, a bit denser, but also beautifully glossy, incredibly dense, incredibly hard. And so, I think it's really interesting that these two kind of different cultural approaches to the same material, which have kind of developed over the last century, have led to these two very different approaches to the output.
Hope you're enjoying the show. I just want to say thank you to all the delegates, speakers, Saskia Buursma and the team at the Bank of England for making Assemble, our first all-day conference, so special. Highlights were too numerous to mention, but the programme ran from issues around the fashion industry to a material examination of the Grenfell Tower disaster, via gay sheep and cake making. It was constantly surprising and hugely informative, and we're very, very grateful to everyone that took part. However, we don't stop at Material Matters, and this is just to let you know that after our successful launch earlier in the year, we will be returning to Gamel Dock in Christianshavn for Material Matters Copenhagen. The fair runs from the 10th to the 12th of June and is part of 3 days of design. If you and your company is interested in taking part, drop us a line at hello@materialmatters.design. That's hello@materialmatters.design. See you there in 2026. So process, you get a sheet of acetate from Italy or Japan. It arrives in your manufacturing facility. How do you turn the 2-dimensional sheet into a 3-dimensional pair of spectacles? I mean, I believe there are something like 50 stages, so you don't have to go through all 50, Tom, but maybe edit some highlights for us.
Yeah, so very crudely,
Yeah,
it comes as a sheet, first of all. So the sheets are about, well, there's 2 ways that you make acetate, two different approaches, an extrusion process and a block process. The extrusion process is what you'd associate with a kind of solid color material or something with a repeated pattern, whereas a block process is something that you'd associate like with a turtle shell, or something with an irregular pattern. And that's essentially made by taking extruded material, very crudely, chopping it up, and then sprinkling that material into a bed, applying acetone as a bonding agent, and then turning that into sheet material. So the output of that is these big sheets, which are probably 3 foot by 5 foot. They could be. So they're large. You then cut those down into slabs, and then the slabs are either used for the front of a pair of glasses or the side of a pair of glasses. A front will generally be 160 mil by 80 mil, and then a slab, the side will be 160 mil by 20 mil. The sides are then what's known as shot, which is where you insert the wire core, the small piece of metal into them. And then the front and the sides are then worked. You have to cut the pattern of the pair of glasses out of the material. And that's obviously that used to be done by hand. Up until maybe 30 years ago, you would scribe a pattern on a piece of perspex, transfer that perspex pattern onto the raw material, and then cut it by hand with a saw. Now it's done by a CNC machine. So you will load the drawing into the CNC machine, clamp down the piece of material, and then it will mill out that design to a fraction of a millimeter, very low tolerances now, onto both the front and the side. So out of that process, you get a very rough looking cut of a frame. And then it will go through many of those different stages that comprise the 50. It could be everything from bumping a bridge, which is adding the little nose pad bump on the front of the frame, so it takes away from the nose, milling a lens groove, which is adding a little 0.5 millimeter groove all the way the inside so you can get a lens, milling the recesses where the hinge goes, aligning the hinge, adding the little pins in and attaching the hinge to the front, adding the miters on the front and the temple, etc., until you get the front and the temple. Then once you've and there's a whole bunch of handwork there with miters and rasps and saw and sandpaper, and depending on the complexity of the design. And then it has to go through the kind of final finishing stages, which involve what's called barreling, where you put the fronts and the sides into literally a barrel that contains small wood chips or little bits of plastic that it then spins and paste, which then spins over days in some cases. It deburrs the material, takes off the sharp edges and any imperfections. And then there's various stages of polishing, glossing, adjustment. And so in theory, you could make a pair of glasses in a day. But generally, these processes are done over a period of 6, 8, 12 weeks.
One of the things I was quite shocked by when I was doing some research for this interview is the amount of acetate that's wasted during the process. It was around 70 or 80%, I've read. You've done the Redo project with Toast that uses this waste.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about it, because a pair of glasses is made from essentially a reductive process, you have a sheet of material and you're milling stuff away. There isn't really any use currently for that material. If you think about a pair of glasses, its cubic volume is very small. So if you think about the frame that I'm wearing, which is also very small, if I cut that away from a slab, you've got the lens aperture which is wasted, you've got the inverse of the bridge, you've got all of the outer material. That tends to end up just being chucked away, which obviously is an incredible waste and not good for the environment. We've been trying. We've used it for lots of other purposes over the past decade. So, traditionally, we've been trying to essentially downcycle it or use it for other kind of industries. So we've donated to jewelry makers, to art colleges, to people using it, the lens apertures for watch faces, things like that. The problem is, you have an excess supply of that material. The ultimate aim is to be able to reuse that material and go back into the spectacle supply chain. And so, what we did with Toast, and we've done a few frames, is essentially break the material down, chip it down to small parts, and then use heat and acetone to reform that into sheet material. And we've actually had pretty good results. The downside is it's not quite as strong as the raw material as you might expect. So it doesn't last as long, which, depending on your perspective, is a good thing or a bad thing. But yeah, we've had really useful results. The challenge the industry has is that generally the producers are so far away from the retailers that it's impossible to have, or very, very difficult to have, that end loop between the two, which is obviously something that we're in a lucky position that we can do that. So currently we still don't have enough use for the waste material. So we currently have a lot of the material in storage, which we're hoping that we can recycle.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's waste material, but you aren't throwing it yet. You're waiting for a process to come. Interesting.
So literally we have bins and bins of it.
It's a lot of storage space, right?
If anyone would like some material, then just drop by Brewery Road and we'll be happily help you out.
Well, I'm sure there are people listening to this podcast who will take you up on that. Just listening to you talk, what's really fascinating is, it seems to me, and this strikes me as an important element of Cubitts, is this combination of technology and craft. I mean, you've talked about the hand processes, but you've also talked about some of the high-tech stuff that you do. You're not an oldie glass maker in that sense.
Oh God, no. And that's the worst possible. To me, that's like the reason, the way that we can be, because also spectacle making has this amazing legacy in London that people don't know about, right?
Well, you talk about the golden age of Clerkenwell quite a lot in some of your output, yeah. Yeah,
and it was like, after obviously Edward Scarlett's 1727, but for, there's a bloke called John Dolland who was a son of a Huguenot silk weaver over in Spitalfields who invented the achromatic lens and a lot of work on bifocals. He set up the world's first manufacturing optician in 1750, and he set it up in Clerkenwell mainly so that it could harness the power of the river fleets to power all of the machines that they're using for grinding lenses. And people associate Clerkenwell now with watchmaking and jewellery. Spectacle making predated that. So spectacle making was the first major industry in Clerkenwell. And for 200 years, it was the place in the world. The optical industry, the other kind of hubs in the world that people know for spectacles are really, well, historically anyway, Japan, which kind of started in the early 1900s, and Italy, which started in the mid 1900s. The spectacle making industry in London predated that by 150, 200 years, and it was all intrinsically tied to Clerkenwell. The problem, for various reasons, it completely died over the 20th century. The war, the establishment of the NHS, kind of indirectly, and also just global changes.
But the NHS, because of the NHS spectacle frames that everybody was given, I suppose.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So essentially, when the NHS was established in 1948, one of its original pillars was that spectacles were going to be given for free.
Which is so extraordinary.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing like that had ever happened, right? But indirect, and it was an incredible scheme. And, some of those NHS frames are still, you can pick them up for £3 in a car boot sale, and they're still amazing. They've lasted the time. But the indirect impact it had is suddenly the UK became so dependent on the NHS for all of those, the hundreds of different spectacles factories that were all clustered around Clerkenwell, all joined together, got subsumed into these larger bodies that were all making for the NHS. And so in 1985, when the NHS decided, actually, no, we're not going to give spectacles for free anymore. You, the general public, can buy your own. Those big conglomerate factories lost their only customer. So two of them basically went out of business straight away. One survived to COVID, but in a much smaller form. So the kind of industry all but died, even though it has this incredible legacy. And this is a very long way of me saying
it's fun. It's fun. It's a history lesson. I'm loving it. It's fun.
The history is amazing. Yeah. That's one of the things that dream together. But the only way you're going to make the history relevant the industry relevant again is by fully adopting technology, modern manufacturing methods, this kind of way, harking back to the kind of ye olde spectacle maker and, a bunch of blokes in a basement whittling away with a saw, with a file and a saw. It just isn't, there's a nostalgia to that, and there'll be people that do that and they do that well. But from my perspective, for us to have like an impact and genuinely change the ways people perceive spectacles and glasses, you have to be respectful of that history, but approach it in a thoroughly modern and progressive and forward-looking way.
Yeah, I mean, spectacles are fascinating things, aren't they? Whenever I buy a pair, which is not that often, but there's always this tension between the medical part, the actual checking of the eyes, and then you step out of that room and suddenly you're being asked to make fashion choices, confronted increasingly with ranges of celebrity spectacles and Kylie Minogue at Specsavers. I'm guessing, by the way, you hate the fashion word. You're nodding.
Yes, yeah. Well, they're more important than that.
Yeah,
that's what and you're right. And that what I think makes glasses so fascinating is that they do kind of coexist in this funny world that between status and design and fashion and optics and physics and medicine and all is like that, and there isn't really anything else like it. And if you look in sort of how people would describe spectacles like a century ago, it would be in a similar category as like, prosthetic arm or prosthetic leg. They were seen in that kind of world. And so now when I see, advertising campaigns for, the new David Beckham range of glasses, it's just weird to me. It's strange. And also the way the industry has developed over the last sort of 20, 30 years, where it's much more around licensing deals and kind of borrowing from fashion. And that's what, companies like Luxottica, who are this huge conglomerate that control a lot of the kind of design element of it, realize that you can kind of take these licenses from stuff outside of optics and apply them to this product, which just, to me, just always jars. Like, what Prada would know about a pair of glasses, or why Gucci would be a specialist in this kind of medical optical device. Just seems odd to me.
Do you have a typical customer in that case?
Well, they normally have poor eyesight.
Okay. Unless they want sunglasses, Tom.
I'm always like to the team, we're a spectacles company who sell sunglasses. We're not an eyewear company. We're not a sunglasses company. And it's funny, whenever we speak to PR companies or anyone in the kind of marketing brand world, they always naturally fall into sunglasses straight away. They're always like, we should do this thing around sunglasses. And we're a spectacles company that offer sunglasses, which I find, like I say, sunglasses are great. They occupy well, but also they have, what I find funny about them is, the origins of sunglasses, that they were developed. The person who made the first ever pair of sunglasses was a bloke called James Isokon, again in 18th century London. And he was interested in tinting lenses to treat medical conditions, particularly syphilis, which was rife in London in the late 1700s. And he tried with blue and green tints that one of the side effects of syphilis, I'm told, is light hypersensitivity. And so he tinted lenses to help people who had syphilis. And I still think there's, in the inside, it still makes me chuckle a little bit when we talk about sunglasses, and I sit in these meetings where they're kind of positioned as this kind of bastion of fashion and cool and identity and status, kind of indelibly linked to kind of celebrity and Hollywood and the big screen, and yet they have their roots in venereal disease.
I did not expect we'd go there in this interview. That's the absolute joy. Well, look, we've talked a little bit about your relationship with glasses, but I'd like to explore it a little bit further, because, I mean, as you said, you were wearing glasses at 14 and inspired by the Smiths and Jarvis Cocker. But was there a moment when you turned and said, I can turn? And, you were collecting vintage frames. Was there a moment where you turned and said, I actually can make a business out of this?
I'm still grappling with that question, to be perfectly honest with you. No, there wasn't really a moment. It's like that. I think to get to this point was probably just a long series of decisions, each of which were kind of necessary but not sufficient on their own. There was never a moment where I was like, aha, like I'm going to try and do this thing now. I mean, I think for me, it was like falling in love with glasses as a confused teenager in Leicester for the first part, and realizing that actually, through Morrissey or Michael Caine or Jarvis Cocker or whoever, like glasses could be cool. Then I think it was just discovering, like, honestly, a lot of it was going to car boot sales and buying old glasses. Like I suddenly realized that, because also glasses, I always just saw, most people's perception of them were this kind of thing that you had to buy if your eyesight was not very good, and you'd go into it full of trepidation, expecting to be ripped off. That is how most people buy glasses.
Right.
And still now, that's how most people, they're like, the thought of going to an optician is akin to going to a dentist when you've got like a tooth that hurt. It's like, oh, this is going to be painful, both physically, but also financially. And I don't like this. And that's how, and realizing, and I kind of felt the same because that's all I thought was available. And then you go to a car boot sale and suddenly for £2, you can buy this old battered up pair of glasses that has there's so much history behind it. You can almost see the person who wore it, and for such a small amount. And then realizing that you could get them polished up and reglazed, and that there was this whole world of vintage glasses that I kind of fell in love with in my 20s. There was meeting a couple of people that were my kind of chaperones into the weird world of optics.
Well, Lawrence Jenkin seems to be quite an important figure. Should we talk about the importance of Lawrence to your career?
Yeah, I mean, Lawrence is brilliant. I mean, he is, I guess, my mentor. He ran a company called Anglo-American, which were kind of one of the oldest, but also last remaining of the kind of British spectacle companies that were had a little factory up literally by Hampstead Heath next to a pub that's there called the Magdala. And his dad bought the company, I think, just after the Second World War. And then Lawrence and his two brothers ran the company sort of 60s until the sort of 80s, 90s. And Lawrence is one of the kind of last remaining of those sort of British master spectacle makers, who's now, I think Lawrence in his 80s now. And he kind of took me on, I guess, as an apprentice. It wasn't formally described in that way, but essentially it was me and a woman called Charlie who used to go around to Lawrence's house in New Cross, and he would teach us the very, very traditional way of spectacle making, but also just show us this whole world, like these kind of, amazing catalogues from the 1920s, tell us the stories of Michael Birch or the drama that happened at the Alga Works, and it was just so, so captivating. And, even to this day, I mean, I speak to Lawrence every week pretty much about a hinge or about a plaque or about the rumor that somebody has got this access to this vintage acetate from the 1950s, or what type of bridge bumper we should use to do X or to do Y, or this run of frames. And so, Lawrence has been my kind of, mentor and guide and kind of source of inspiration, really.
How did you find each other?
If you're into glasses, it's a small world.
It's a small world. Okay.
Everyone knows everybody. I think Lawrence has played a huge role. Another person who I would shout out is a bloke called Neil Handley, who runs the College of Optometry Museum just on Craven Street, just by Charing Cross. And so he is probably the foremost expert historian, source of all knowledge about the history of kind of the optical industry more widely. And I often talk to, again, Neil has been a huge source of knowledge and information. And I still remember, rocking up at the museum, God knows how long ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, full of enthusiasm, telling him that I really wanted to start this glasses company and this is how I wanted to do it. And I think he kind of looked at me with sort of glazed eyes or rolled eyes. It's like, who is this complete chancer? But he's continued to play, a huge role and source of influence. And still, even now, I mean, when we launched this frame inspired by the 1920s, a few months ago. And that was directly from visiting the college and going through the archives and getting inspiration from Neil. So I guess, both Neil and Lawrence played a huge role in kind of planting those seeds that led to Cubitts as it is now.
This entrepreneurial streak that you obviously have, where did that come from? Because I think I'm right in saying that your mum worked in museums, your dad worked for a company selling plastic pipes in Leicester. So it didn't necessarily come from them, or did it?
The word entrepreneur is a weird one, Brian. It's very much been fetishized over the last 10 years. And even when I started Cubitts, like people, which is only 12, 13 years ago, I don't remember people talking about being an entrepreneur in kind of these sacred terms, right? It's a much more recent phenomenon. And I still don't really see myself as it. I mean, I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. I set out to follow something that I really felt passionate about and loved, that then became a kind of business. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think some of the characteristics that you'd associate with entrepreneurship, which is try and do something different, try and do something new, probably not really settling for the kind of status quo, being prepared to take risks. I think I probably have in my psyche, but they can also manifest themselves in lots of other ways, not necessarily positive ways.
You had an applied maths background.
Yeah.
You worked for companies like Deloitte for a while. I mean, that presumably is quite useful if you're setting up a business.
Definitely. I mean, at the time I was like, why am I doing any of this stuff? But in hindsight, it's been quite helpful. I mean, I think common to all of it is I get bored easily. And I don't like doing the same thing a lot of times, which probably comes back to your early question about managing people. I like doing new things and exciting. I get a lot of the idea of doing the same thing every day. To be honest, for 2 consecutive days fills me with complete and utter dread. I like problem solving, that whole arc of failure, trying again, perseverance, finally making progress, all that kind of stuff. And I think and even now, that's still what defines me. And this is what I still struggle with when you have 150 people and the sort of CEO's role becomes much more about kind of watching the pot than it does about deciding on the recipe.
Interesting. I mean, was it an advantage, do you think, coming from this kind of more corporate background into the industry rather than being embedded in the optics world?
I'm not sure the corporate bit. I don't know. Maybe that's helped. I don't know. But I think not coming from the industry is definitely 100%, 1,000,000% helped. I still love the industry, but it's not been without its challenges. And I think my naivety and kind of enthusiasm has definitely got, if I hadn't had that, there's a lot of people in the industry that and I think this is true of all industries, right? So it's not particularly spectacles or optics, but the sense of, well, that's not how it's done. That's not going to work. And I could give you so many examples of people that have said to me, rolled their eyes and said, that's not going to work. You can't do it like that.
Can you give me an example of that?
I mean, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, plenty. I remember we opened a store on Jermyn Street in St. James. I was meeting somebody who I won't name, but he has, he's been in the optics industry for 40 years. He has brands and, he has a factory in Italy and very, very and I remember me taking him there and saying, I want to do this, open this place here, this tiny little 190 square feet. And I want to do it specializing in bespoke. And I want to be selling direct to the customers. And this is how I want it to look. And he was just it's not going to work. You can't do that. You don't have the marketing power. That's not how the industry works. The way the industry works is that you have a brand and you go to trade shows and you wholesale your products to opticians and you need to be in bed with the opticians. That's the way it works. You can't sell to customers. I remember going into an optician's I won't actually say the address, I'll give it away, in sort of Shoreditch and I was looking, and this bloke had a vintage collection. I was going to, and he had there's a brand called Cazal that I really like, an Austrian brand from the 70s. And I got excited because he had his Cazals and he was like, well, you seem to know quite a lot about what, because I was talking about the hinge construction. And he was like, he realized I wasn't like there to buy. And he was like, so what, basically asking. And I told him that I wanted to start like a glasses company, and he threw me out. He physically threw me out. There's a period where he stood in front of me so I couldn't see the frames, and then wouldn't move until I left. It was incredibly awkward. And I was just like, and there's been a lot of those there's been a lot of those kind of experiences, which, you know, it's hard not to, it does affect you after a while and make you a little bit more cynical. But I think a lot of those things have just kind of spurred me on, and it just kind of makes you more driven to get stuff done, really.
Well, the drive thing is interesting. There's an article in the Squire that came out last year that suggested you were, and I kind of quote, semi-quote, unrelenting in your artistic vision. Is that something you recognize in yourself, this notion of being unrelenting?
I mean, that unrelenting artistic vision sounds pretty pretentious, but I'd say unrelenting, yeah. I'm not very, I get a lot of feedback from the team, which is sort of along the lines of, please just back off, Tom, leave me alone, give me a bit of space. Yeah, I think I would say unrelenting.
I mean, does that mean you've had to sacrifice things in your personal life, for example?
Of course. Anyone's starting a company, starting anything. There is no, I mean, it's like, I've definitely erred on the side of, on one part of the extreme, and sort of lent into it. And I think for the people that have been around me for parts of the 12 years, I apologize. But I know there were periods where I've not been particularly nice to be around.
Well, I was just wondering how that would manifest itself, Tom.
I mean, I've definitely lost breakdowns in relationships as a direct consequence of my work. Yeah, for sure. You know, just been, I mean, even now, I still regularly, I mean, this morning I was up at like 4:30, 4:45 in the morning, like pacing around doing stuff on ChatGPT. Like, it's not, I've tried to control that part of me, but it's not like, it's within me. I definitely have a kind of addictive personality, which I've tried at periods to kind of, harness and tame and reduce, but actually now I just sort of fully embrace it and try and put it to good and not irritate people too much.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I mean, we are coming to the end of our time, and it's been kind of, a history lesson, a fascinating history lesson of the history of spectacles, stuff I didn't know, which is wonderful. Final question, because we're coming to the end of our hour. What can we expect from Cubitts and from you in the future?
Well, I can tell you sort of short-term practical thing that I'm very excited about. That's about as far as I can see at the moment, in that we're in May 2026, we'll be moving to a new facility, a new site, which I'm very excited about, which is one street away from where I am now, also in King's Cross. We can't leave King's Cross. It's a 13,000 square foot converted Victorian stables, where this is kind of what I want to use it to kind of bring together all the stuff we've really been working on over the last kind of 12 years, where we bring together kind of craft, but technology and materiality, modern production, a glazing lab, all together under one roof in a very kind of optimized, streamlined way, which is also a kind of real homage celebration of spectacles and the kind of historical legacy it has to London. And hopefully Lawrence as well, who I mentioned, is also going to move in and run his workshop from the same site.
Very good.
So I think there'll be some sort of like beautiful kind of full circle moment, if we can kind of, get through the next 6 months and this week's budget and whatever the world has to throw at us between now and then.
Oh, very good. Well, when does that open?
The plan is 14th of May, 2026.
14th of May, 2026. Well, we should all put it on our diaries. Tom, that was brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Grant.
To find out more about Tom and Cubitts, go to cubitts.com. You can also go to our website to hear other podcasts that I've done, to sign up to our newsletter, and to find out all about the various events we'll be running in 2026, including Material Matters Copenhagen. One more thing, it would make me incredibly happy if you went to my Patreon page and made a pledge at patreon.com/Material Matters. For as little as £3.50 a month, you can receive invites to various Material Matters events, as well as getting access to each episode before it's published to the wider world. Material Matters is a completely independent concern, and any help you can offer would be hugely appreciated. Ultimately, you'll be helping to take the message, the importance of materials, skill, craft, and design to a whole new audience. Thanks very much for listening.